Okay. Good morning, everyone.
That's how it's going. That's the
Okay.
one that I emailed.
Wait. Is that really
Isn't it Hasgo?
Good morning, everyone. If you can please put all your microphones on mute. I will be admitting, I'm continuing to admit members as the clock ticks, and we will be starting here shortly. Now, I'm going to give it 1 or 2 minutes, and we'll start hopefully right on time.
Hi, Amanda. Hi, all.
Hola. Oh, what a great crowd. Huh? Okay. In respect of everyone's time, I'd like to get this going. My name is Armando Beltran. I'm the Art Network Chair for YPO. And today we're having a really, really interesting conversation on a topic that I can't believe get any hotter than this one. No, as I shared with many of you in the WhatsApp chat we have in the Art Network, yesterday the New York Times published their daily podcast on NFTs, art NFTs, and this just seems to be a topic in vogue, in great interest of art people and everywhere, it's just mainstream. Today, because of this and certainly the recent auction in Christie's, in which a digital art NFT was sold for over $69 million, that generated a lot of interest amongst the Art Network members, and we decided to act accordingly, and we're putting together a fantastic only in YPO conversation with some of the main players in this auction and certainly in the art world. And I will let my colleagues, both Lana De Beer, who's a member, of course, of the executive committee of the Art Network and a member of the Macedonia, Acadian, I'm not even sure how to pronounce that, chapter, and also secondary chapter in Lagos. And I will also ask Daphne Tata, who's in YPO Miami, to join me in introducing the YPOers who will be sharing with us everything that is to know about NFTs and the art market. So with that, I'll turn it up to you, Lana, and thank you very much, everyone. Again, if everyone can please mute their microphones, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, how are you? Welcome. My name is Daphne Mentata, and I'm from YPO Miami, as Armando said. I have the pleasure of introducing to you all of the panelists. Me and my husband have been collecting contemporary art for some time, but we haven't invested in NFTs, so I'm happy to learn with all of you about this topic. So first, I'm going to introduce to you Heidi Zuckerman. Heidi, I'm sorry, is the CEO and director of OCMA, the Orange County Museum of Art, and a globally recognized leader in contemporary art. She's host of podcast Conversations About Art and author of the Conversations with Artists book series. Zuckerman is the former 14-year CEO and director of the Aspen Art Museum. After reimagining the museum as a world-class institution, she raised more than 130 million and built a new and highly acclaimed museum with Shigeru Ban, the 2014 Pritzker Prize winner for architecture. She has curated more than 200 exhibitions during her career and is the author of numerous books, including a widely loved children's books, The Rainbow Hour with artist Amy Adler. From 1999 to 2005, she was chair of the curatorial department at the UC Berkeley Art Museum. Previously, she was a curator at the Jewish Museum in New York. Heidi also served as the chair of the YPO Art Network. She earned a BA in Europe History from University of Pennsylvania and an MA in Art History from Hunter College, and a Harvard Business School Executive Education Woman on Board certification in 2018. Then we have Herve. Herve Laren has been a YPO member since 2012 and a graduate of Columbia Business School. And prior to his MBA, he worked at LVMH. Harvey Laren has been in the crypto business since 2014. He first discovered Bitcoin as a way to send money to charities in Venezuela, where his mother is from. He was asked to present Bitcoin during the YPO HBS program and presented the benefit of this asset class to over 12 YPO chapters all over the world. Herve was the first buyer of a piece of art during Bitcoin Art Basel in Miami in 2017. As the owner of Herve Gallery in the most exclusive art district in the metaverse, he has been building his personal NFT collection. He was one of the 30 bidders approved by Christie's for the Beepley auction and the first to ever put a 1 million bid on an NFT. In January 2019, Herve published in the YPO magazine the 13 reasons why to invest in Bitcoin. At the time of publication, Bitcoin was 3,590. And last but not least, we have Francis Berlin. Francis has been a president of Christie's Asia Pacific since January 2019. In his leadership role, Francis manages all of the Asia Pacific-based teams, including the regional offices, and is accountable for all of the transactions of Asian collectors globally, across live, online, and private sales. Additionally, he assumes global oversight of the Asian and World Art Department. Francis joined Christie's in 2016 as a global managing director, Asian Art, from his previous role in Swarovski, overseeing their business in Asia Pacific. With 17 years of experience in premium and luxury consumer goods, Francis began his career in management consulting at McKinsey & Company in Europe and Asia. He is a member of the board of advisors for Keith Earth Fund in Japan and serves on various boards and non-executive chairman and independent non-executive director. Francis holds a degree in management from ESSEC Business School and in France, and a diploma Kaufmann from the University of Mannheim in Germany, majoring in business administration and psychology. So here we have Heidi as the moderator.
Good morning. Thanks everyone for being here. Well, actually, I just realized it's morning for me. It's 7:07 a.m. So I have a matcha latte, and I know that we're joined by people all over the world. So I just wanted, and I know it's quite late for Francis. So wanted to start by thanking everyone for being here.
This is why I'm actually not on matcha latte, but I'm on red wine. So.
That's perfect. So I wanted to start off by just acknowledging that YPO is such an incredible place that whenever there's anything that's of interest that's happening in the wider world, there are always YPOers connected to it. And so I want to just do a kind of shout out to Armando for jumping on this. There was a conversation in our WhatsApp group for the Art Network, and we put this together pretty quickly. And so I really appreciate everyone's flexibility to make this time happen. I wanted to start out by also acknowledging that there's probably a pretty broad range of knowledge about NFTs in general, and then art NFTs specifically here. So we want to try and make sure that everyone feels like they're leaving today smarter and having learned something. I want to, with that in mind, I wanted to ask a question to both Francis and Herve I think one of the things that people don't understand is that there are two, I don't know why we're having echo. I'm sorry, I don't know if that's me, but I'll just keep going. Seems like maybe someone has it
We,
twice,
we,
but
we hear you fine, Heidi. I hear you fine.
okay. So I wanted to start off by setting up a question to have a parameters around the idea that NFTs and art NFTs are not the same thing. And Francis sent me a really interesting article this morning that highlights that point, because there's a benefit to an NFT separate from the idea of an art NFT. So that's a question to, I think, maybe Herve first, to explain what an NFT is. Of course, it's a non-fungible token, but maybe you could talk about the idea of how that exists separate and distinct from art. And then Francis will go to you and talk about how they come together.
Yeah, so without well, first of all, thank you for having me, and I'm honored to be on the panel. So I think the key word in this, and something a misunderstood word, is the word fungible. Fungible and non-fungible, what we're talking about, is two very important concepts when we relate to cryptocurrency and cryptography. Fungible is basically everything is the same. So for example, a Bitcoin is fungible. There's 21 million Bitcoins. Every Bitcoin can be traded for another Bitcoin. $100 bill is fungible. We can trade it. We want it to be the same. It has to be the same in order to work. When it relates to non-fungible, it's something that is unique. Something that is one of a kind, and something that is registered on the blockchain as being a unique piece. And actually, we often think that, well, non-fungible has to be art. Art is actually a small piece of the non-fungible. It has probably the highest emotional connection. But before being interesting in art within the metaverse, there were two bigger asset class that were non-fungible. The first one is virtual real estate. So in order to have a virtual gallery and put a virtual piece of art, I need to own virtual real estate. And that virtual real estate is going to be one of a kind. So we can go in that parallel world, the metaverse, and I would have a bunches of pieces of land that I know are going to be owned and operated by me, and that nobody can take it over. Now, that is not the case. For example, if we're in a country where it's a difficult situation, you might own a piece of land, and the next day, for some reason, that piece of land, might be taken away from you. When it relates to the metaverse, that piece of land forever will be owned by you, because you will have the private key of that piece. The other non-fungible element, and probably something that hits closer to home for a lot of people, is a name. So for example, the name Herve, A-I-R-V-E-Y, the phonetic spelling, is owned by me on the metaverse. The Herve gallery is owned by me. The same way that a website, if you own Amazon.com, that name will be owned by you forever. So names, virtual real estate, and then came in afterwards art, are one and unique pieces that are registered in a public database, and that's going to be assigned to you forever.
Okay, that's great. You set up my next question perfectly. So, Francis, let's have you talk about, and thank you. That was a great introduction, and I love the reference to things outside of art, to real estate, and to like trademarking or branding or naming, because those are all things that people can understand. So that's a great way to give that kind of context. So Francis, can you talk a little bit about how art and NFTs came together to the broadest consciousness, which is what happens when art kind of jumps the shark and ends up, on the front page of the Financial Times, for example?
Yeah, so I hope the echo is not coming from my computer. If it does, please let me know. But I think look, for us, it really all came together very suddenly a few weeks ago when we put that NFT from Beeple for auction, and it made such an incredible price. And it was, of course, a surprise to a lot of people around the world. It started by being a surprise for us at Christie's, because it positioned people to be, as you've all read, the third most expensive living artist after Hockney and I think Kunz. And I think this has all of a sudden, and when I say all of a sudden, it's literally within 5 minutes, because within 5 minutes it moved from, I was watching, it was late actually in Hong Kong, I was looking at the Christie's internal app that we have just to follow the bids, and I would see things going from, the bid go from I think 15 million US to 60 million US, literally in 5 minutes. So it was extremely sudden for all of us. And all of a sudden, it actually put art NFT from being something on the fringes to be something possibly being mainstream, with a lot of implications. And maybe we'll go into some of these in this conversation. But I think first and foremost, an art NFT, there's a question, which is the art NFT first and foremost an NFT, or is it a piece of art? The way I understand it, and I'm not the tech guy on this panel for sure, the way I understand is that the NFT is the way that we bring security, authenticity, unicity, and proof of ownership of a digital asset, whatever the digital asset is. It could be a piece of virtual real estate, could be a contract, could be a piece of music, could be a digital drawing, or it could be a collage of 5,000 of these drawings, like the Beeple art of work actually was. But behind the NFT, there's still the piece of art. The NFT is bringing value to securing a transaction or ownership or unicity of that digital piece of art. But at the end of the day, behind this is still the asset itself, which is the art. And I think in talking about art NFT, we just need to get the balance right between what is the NFT part of it and what is the art part of it when we look at why to collect, or what is the actual intrinsic value of these assets.
Great. So Herve, let's go back to you. And again, a great setup, because the idea is that NFTs can be used for tangible physical works of art as well as digital, more ethereal works of art. It's sort of like a fingerprint, right?
Yeah, correct. I mean, it is. Sometimes we make it very complicated, the word NFT, but at the end, it's a certificate of authenticity. And I think what often is missing in the art world, and I've been going to Art Basel for 7 years in Miami. I've been to Art Basel in Hong Kong as well. So I had an affinity for art in general, and I obviously had an affinity for cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology very, very early on. So I kind of put the two, pieces together, if you wish. And for me, it's a little bit the say, I don't know about art, but I know about what I like. And what I looked for is, the things that I liked. And when I decided to build a gallery on the metaverse, obviously it came from a business opportunity standpoint, where I realized that, especially in this, over the last year and a half, that the fixed costs were very low and the upside potential was very high. If you have a place in the world where you can have, tens of thousands or millions of people passing by and able to make a transaction within 10 minutes and own that piece of art, I believe that this is where the future is going. And when we look at the stock market itself, the 5 largest companies are digital companies. When you look at the time that we spent in front of a screen, when we look at the next generation who want to be paid, in cryptocurrency and don't have trust in governments in general, and when you look at the time that you spend, looking at a piece of art on the wall versus time you spend on your phone and looking at your screen or at your Tesla screen at your car, you realize that it's a matter of eyeballs, and the eyeballs and the attention is on things digital. The reason why the people buy art as well, or things unique, it's to post it and to share it to their friends. So that image can be copied 1,000,000 times, but having the ownership of that image is something that I believe will grow more and more with time, as I don't see that trend going anywhere.
So how much time would you say you spend looking at the digital art that you own?
So I think there's different ways to look at it. There's first from I would say from a business standpoint. Setting up, I think there's a transition happening. I think for newcomers to come into the traditional art market, it's going to be very difficult to have an impact if they don't come with less than $100 million in order to secure artists, and or having a big lock and finding an artist that is up and coming. However, there's a brand new world where things can be done really from the bottom up, the same way that you can build an e-commerce store in 1997 and have a chance to take over Walmart. I think that this situation is happening as well on art. And also when you look at millennials, which is really the target market for this type of piece, they are going to spend more time online, and what they're interested in is those virtual elements. So we talk a lot about Beeple. Beeple have 2.5 million followers on Instagram before starting the auction. So for a lot of people, he didn't come out of nowhere. This is a guy that for 13 years has been putting 1 piece of art a day. That's how the name 5,000 pieces came from his art. He did collaboration with Katy Perry, Nike, Louis Vuitton. So he was already established within the space. However, there was not the recognition that he was a real artist. The same way that 10 years ago we would say, hey, Facebook is not a real company, or Amazon is not a real company. I think that times have changed. And today is another example. You have Coinbase, the exchange platform, who's doing an IPO on the NASDAQ and who might reach 150 billion dollar valuation. So we went from a world where there was basically no consideration within this new asset class, because it was hard to understand how can something digital have actually any value. We're often talking about intrinsic value, but when we look at the intrinsic value of a Picasso painting, I mean, the intrinsic value is really $100. I mean, it's a piece of wood and some painting. Now, the perception of it is that it's worth $100 million. The intrinsic value of a $100 bill is actually 15 cents. This is what it cost the US government to actually print it. But in our imagination, it's worth $100. And I think that's, when you read the book Sapiens, that's what they're talking about. Our capacity to be humans is to imagine things that don't exist. So now that you have $100 million that have 100 million people that have a Bitcoin wallet, and we all agree that it's worth $65,000 and it'll probably worth $100,000 by the end of the year, then it's a medium of exchange for everyone.
Okay, all good points, and I'm going to come back to Francis in a second. But just the question is, how much time do you spend looking at the digital art that you own, like on a daily or weekly basis? Like, do you like looking at it? Do you feel emotionally attached to it?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. The first one, the big feeling that there is for any collectors is the capacity to own something that is unique. The second part is that, when we track on our iPhone the number of hours that we spend a day, we probably, I'm embarrassed to say, I'm probably, averaging out 6 to 8 hours a day on my iPhone. And thirdly, yes, there is the digital element, but that digital element can follow you everywhere, meaning that you arrive in your home, that art piece can be on your TV screen. You get into your Tesla, that art piece can be on your screen of your phone. And most importantly, you can print it and also put it on your wall. So it also has the benefit, but you have the certainty that it's an authentic piece and that you're the only one to own it. And I do believe that myself probably a little less than others on social media, but a lot of people post these pieces of art and have a very strong connection to it. When people share his art to 2.5 million people, or when people share their collection on Instagram, I do believe that there's a strong emotional connection to every piece. And there's certain pieces that, no matter the price, I discovered a Norwegian artist recently, and I will never sell that piece. I mean, that piece will, I will always keep it the same way that I will keep my name as an NFT on the metaverse. There's no amount of money that I will sell it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Francis, Herve said that you can't get into the actual tangible art world without $100 million. Can you talk about what else Christie's auctions besides, Beeple and NFTs and this idea of an emotional connection to artwork, and who did we see bidding? We know that Herve was a qualified bidder. Who was bidding on Beeple, and how do they compare to your traditional audience?
Right. So there's a couple of things. The first one is I acknowledge your question, Heidi. I want to come back to something that Herve was saying about the relationship between technology and art. This is not new, and I think technology is here to help art become more sophisticated, whether it's in the way it's being created or the way it's being distributed. Think about the Impressionist painter who had access to pigment in tube when they actually had, back in those days, to grind it in the studio. So all of a sudden they were able to paint outside of their studio, and that gave the beautiful paintings that we all know. Think about electronic music that really lowered the bar for musicians to be able to create music just in their own garage with a synthesizer, when before you needed a whole band. So I think all these technological evolution are just here to also support creativity for artists, and I think it's absolutely great. The second point is on the relationship between art and the medium of art. Music can exist through a band live, it can exist through a vinyl, a CD, an MP3 file. The medium is here actually to convey and to ease the storage and so on, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the music gets better or that it gets worse. And I think it's at the end of the day, it boils down to art before it actually relates to anything else. It's really the piece of art itself that actually I think is driving the value more than the medium that actually supports it. And then when it comes to actual value of art, there's so many dimensions on assessing what that value is. And I think it's, probably not even the best person to talk about this, but there is so many dimensions that justify why we think art is worth what it is commercially. And some of it can be purely academic. I think, yes, Picasso can be worth just the price of the canvas, the oil that was put on it and the frame. But academically, I don't think anyone would deny that an artist like Picasso has brought a lot to art creation and has influenced generations and continues to influence generations of artists. So we speak about not the monetary value of Picasso, but the academic value of Picasso, and I think this is important. You have the emotional connection to the art, and just the encounter that you have with objects or with an opera. Or, a music which is very hard to describe, but it's something that speaks to you, and maybe not to the person who is next to you, but it does speak to you. And I think it's what differentiates, I think, mankind from animals also. And then of course you get into other things, from the philanthropic value, you're custodian of the art, and maybe it's not necessarily an object that speaks to you, but you think it's an important one that you need to preserve because it's a Song dynasty Royale, and there's only 50 pieces in museums across the world, and it's very expensive, but you have the means to actually own it for a generation or two, pass it to your kids, but at least you protect it because somebody has protected it before you. So there's all these dimensions when it comes to art, and I think they're really relevant to collectors, because each collector has, at the end of the day, we're having these discussions, we're talking with collectors. We're having these discussions because it's, it's like what speaks to you as a collector, and what speaks to you and the objects that you actually collect, beyond the simple question of, I have X, dollars that I want to spend, and I'm going to buy something, and how much is this going to be worth in a week or in 10 years from now? which of course collects us more to the, the investment value of the speculative value of art, which I'm probably not the best person to talk about here. So again, I think it's a broad topic, but it's important to NFT is NFT, but art NFT. I'll come back to an earlier question I was asking: is it art NFT? Is it more an NFT or is it more art? When we look at to address your question, Heidi, it was a long introduction to my answer. When we look at the pattern of bidding for people, and I have to thank Herve for taking part in this auction, we had above $1 million. We had 34 bidders, and more than 30 of these 34, I think it's 30 or 31, had never transacted at Christie's even once. And $1 million is a very serious level, even to be qualified. I mean, some of you certainly have participated in auction. The first time you show up at the Christie's auction and say, I want to bid $1 million, we're quite serious on taking deposits and making sure that you're going to settle the deal. So that speaks for the enthusiasm that, this object in the traditional 250-year-old auction house Christie's has generated in a completely new audience for us, which I think is great because, as I said earlier, I think art NFTs used to be on the fringes. They are becoming mainstream, just like Bitcoin being valued at, $1 trillion is not on the fringes anymore. We can't ignore it anymore. And I think it's, but at the end of the day, I think there's a few mics that are on. We go if they're off. But I think the pattern of bidding that we saw on bringing the price to what it was also suggests that in the art versus NFT of the equation, there might have been quite a bit of NFT at the expense of the art side. And I think but it's good because at least we're having this conversation today. Why? Because people sold for $69 million. If it had sold for $1 million or 2 or 3, I don't think we'd be having this discussion. But I can't help thinking there's a bit of a vindication here of a community who was dedicated to everything related to crypto, who has a moment to make a statement that this is here to stay, which I also think it will. But there is it's a turning point that has been it's been instigated by the crypto world. It's a hack of the crypto world into the this old 250-year-old house.
So there was a specific question for you, Francis, about the payment of the BP, the buyer's premium, and whether it was paid in crypto or whether it was paid in cash.
So it was, I might have said in earlier conversation that it was paid in cash. It was actually paid in crypto. It was paid in Ethereum. So the full amount of slightly over $69 million was paid in Ether. I think it was in Ether, and it was both the hammer and the buyer's premium. So the hammer was 60.25 million US, and the balance of 9 million is the BP, which was the first for us. And any one of you who has worked closely with auction house, we have a complicated business because we're an agency business. So any risk that we have on the balance on the selling side has to be balanced with the buying side and vice versa. And that includes, of course, collecting payments. So if we sell something in US dollar, we have to collect payments in US dollar. We don't, work around hedging currency. So we did that with people, the seller, because he basically said he was happy to be paid in Ethereum.
Thank you. Just a reminder for everyone to please keep your
performances.
Can you please keep your phones on mute? I'm going to be so happy when we are done with Zoom, I have to say. Sorry, whoever is not on mute, can you please put your phone back on mute? Thank you. So, okay, one of the things that that you were talking about, Herve, as a benefit to. Okay, as a benefit to the.
Dico la carta igienica. Che volete da me? No, qui.
Okay. we need the host to please mute everyone.
Just,
Sorry
Heidi,
about
I'm
this.
I'm trying
Okay.
to mute them, but my
Okay.
computer is not allowing. I'm sorry. So
Okay.
Stefania, if you can please mute, and everyone as they're joining, please keep this in mute. I'm doing my best with the tools that I have.
No, I'm sure. Thank you. Okay. So Herve, you were talking about the NFT as a way of owning something forever and protecting the asset and kind of staking a claim. And it's an interesting connection to what Francis was saying about like the stewardship piece, this idea of protecting something while you own it that has been owned by people that came before you and people that will come after you. But there is sort of like a backdoor, right, into the NFT, which is the pulling the rug. And there was an interesting article that came out on that. So if you don't actually control the location of the digital asset, then how can you actually protect it? So for example, all the crypto gets paid to the artist, you know, whether it's on OpenSea or, you know, through this specific Christie's auction, you have this NFT for the object, but you don't actually control where the asset sits. Talk about that risk.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the biggest, I would say, misconception is the fact that you can leave an NFT or you can leave Bitcoin, you know, unprotected and assume that it's going to be there when you come back. I think it has to be treated the same way that you would treat a regular painting or a regular $100 bill. Meaning that these can be taken by anybody at any time. You have to treat it like you treat cash. You wouldn't leave a Jean-Michel Basquiat in your house with the door open and then be surprised if it disappears and say that, you know, there's an issue with Jean-Michel Basquiat, you know, somebody took it, therefore it's Basquiat's problem. No, that has to be taken care of, that has to be protected, that has to be put on specific wallets. And same applies to your Bitcoin. If you leave Bitcoin, then the seed phrase available for somebody to take it is like leaving your, you know, your debit card with your PIN number, you know, written on it and say, oh, somebody took something from my account. So I think that that's also a little bit the intimidating part is the fact that there's a security element attached to it, and things can disappear very quickly for a non-savvy user. That's why some people rather buy, you know, shares of Bitcoin through vehicle on the stock market than holding it in their Coinbase account or you know, on their cold wallet. So that is something that's going to come with time, and the education part about it, and has to be organized and treated in a very you know, diligent way.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because Francis talked about how this is almost like a hack, right, of this 250-year-old company. And if there is like an endemic character, for example, of people who are attracted to being disruptors, you know, like yourself, or seeing opportunities in these spaces, then there could also potentially be a mischievous aspect to some of the artists, right? So the one that I was referencing, I mean, he had sold a bunch of these art NFTs, and then he changed the images after they had been sold to screenshots of literal rugs, which he then replaced. And then of course, you know, some of the buyers liked it even better, right? So, I mean, you could talk about what happened with Banksy and the work that was shredded at Sotheby's. So how do you kind of manage that like tricksterism, right, that often comes with artists in this space? Does that make it better? Does it make it scarier? Does it make it more interesting? Is it just a thing?
Yeah, I think when any new market appears, it's very difficult to see where the bid and the ask is. That's why, you know, under Christie's auctions, when it says value, it says unknown. And to my recollection, I've never seen let's call it a major piece of art with an unknown value. There's usually a range, whether we're going above the range, that can happen. But usually there is a range that we all agree on. There it becomes, where everybody does their homework. I had a very specific, amount value that was attached to these pieces. And it was a very rational number. It sounds a little crazy, when we hear about it, but I was, very comfortable with that number and saw the potential on the upsides for different elements, whether it's tokenization of the assets, whether it's, increased traffic in the metaverse, whether it is, having a piece, a historical piece on the being available for display. So there was a very clear rationale. I think when it comes to publicity stunts, for lack of a better word, then it becomes the market is going to decide. Are we on an NFT bubble? Maybe, perhaps. Certainly, I mean, there was the funny part is, yeah, it reached $69 million and it put the spotlight on it, but things were a lot easier when nobody was looking at the space. I mean, right now, you're becoming priced out on certain, piece of real estate, certain pieces of art. People certainly is, completely priced out of the equation. CryptoPunks, the next auction of Christie's, is also, going at a very high level. So, if you ask me, it's probably, shooting ourselves in when I say ourselves, it's probably the crypto community in the foot, having, the spotlight being put on this, where, everybody's basically chasing the opportunity and every celebrities in the US are launching NFT collections. So it is very unclear where the bid and the ask is. Certainly, the price of the Ethereum going up, also helps. And I want to bounce back on a point that Francis said as well, which is the recognition of the crypto community by a historical auction house. You have to remember that for the last 5 years, anything that was crypto related, Bitcoin related, was taking at best in a non-serious way. People were fully trusting central governments, central banks, the way that the statu quo, the way that things were working, saw this, little internet money as a fad. Frankly, saw most of, internet company 10 years ago as a fad as well, when, remember, Twitter valuation and Facebook valuations were seen as completely absurd and just collapsing. So I think it's also, for the crypto community, a big stamp of approval. Obviously, Christie's took the risk and therefore they deserve the reward. I think also there was a point of the crypto community to make it successful, the same way that the Coinbase IPO today is going to be successful, because all of a sudden there's a seat around the table, and somebody that comes with Bitcoins and NFTs is going to be able to express themselves, and mostly is going to be also recognized as a new generations of art collectors. And the main reason is that, in order for a company or a product to be successful, it needed to have institutional money coming in. Well, at first wealthy angel investors, then institutional money, and then we would dump the end results on the retail buyers. All of a sudden, you have retail buyers who are creating movements. And the reason it's very hard to value is that we value network effects. And network effect is something that is brand new to everyone. And the reason why people put it at zero value is they says, well, these are not companies, that's Satoshi Nakamoto, we don't know who it is. And where's the company, where's the cash flow, where's the EBITDA? We don't have that, it's worth nothing. And we're realizing that now when you have an artist, let's say like people that have 2.5 million followers on Instagram, and that creates a very powerful network around it, that value of that network has effect. it's a little bit like when the first, phone lines were in. If you had one telephone, it was worth nothing. If 100 person who had a telephone, it wasn't worth 1 + 1 + 1. It was worth 100 exponential. And I think that was the mental shift that I got in 2015, when I saw, well, these network effects, once they're established, are going to be very powerful, and they're going to be concentrated under one monetary policy like Bitcoin, or one artist like Beeple, and that is going to have value in the future.
That is a super interesting point, that idea on how you value the network effect. And this makes a ton of sense in terms of why the Beeple auction was so successful, because you had an invested community who, as you said, saw an opportunity for validation by an established brand. So Francis, a couple of kind of tactical questions that came from the chat. Can art NFTs be insured, number one? And can you talk about this idea of the NFT as a fingerprint, for example? What impact will it have on tangible works of art, painting, sculpture, etc.?
So the first question on insuring NFTs. So the short answer is I don't know. The long answer is probably anything can be insured as long as you can put a price on the risk. And that's a good segue to talk about what the risks are. So we spoke briefly about how safe actually NFTs are to own. And I like the analogy from Herve on, you wouldn't keep a basket in your home with the door open, or, don't leave $100 banknote in front of your house expecting when you come back in the evening it's still there. And I think there is one thing. So the Beeple auction didn't come out of nowhere. It was a month of work for us. Not to bring it to $69 million, but to make sure that the legal framework around it was thoroughly understood by us, and the commitment that we make to buyers when they actually bid is that we know exactly what is it that they're bidding for. And I think it brings it to, so insurance, again, I don't know, but what are the risks that are attached to it? I mean, let me just give you a few. First one is NFTs. So when the buyer of the Beeple work won the auction, essentially what we sent is a link, or is a series of character, whatever it is, which is the unique key that gives access to the work that is stored on the server. But we don't control that server. That server's control for that work is actually controlled by I think the artist himself. And it brings, and the reference we're giving to that neither confirms the name of that artist who all of a sudden decided that his NFTs would become works as opposed to portraits, is exactly this. So we basically transfer a certificate, a share certificate or certificate of ownership of an asset, but the asset itself can be changed by a third party. So I think it's a material risk that should not be ignored when it comes to art NFT. There's other risks attached to it, which are, what is the underlying object? Does the original, the person who's minting the object that transforms the digital asset into, that attached to the digital asset an NFT, do they actually have the IP rights over that work? Is that the original work from the artist? These are really fair questions to ask, because when you're an art collector and you buy a painting, the first question you have is that painting actually from the artist? So, and I think they're also relevant to NFTs. You don't necessarily have, when you buy an art NFT, you don't necessarily have the commercial rights or the copyrights that are attached to that object. And the way you might use it is, might differ from object to object. So I think it points at, but that's the digital space. So there's a whole universe, a whole range of possibilities that, of course, are of risks that are attached to these objects that are proportional, I guess, to the opportunities that actually it offers. I'm happy to get into the opportunities in a second. So I don't know if it's insurable, but I know that there are some risks that can be attached to it. I think it's important for anyone who buys it to know these risks are. Now, the impact, your second question was the impact on the existing, or at least the more mainstream art market, which is on physical assets, sculptures. I mean, it's assets and collectibles with sculptures, paintings. We also trade vintage watches, diamonds, wine, and so on. And how you actually can connect these two? Well, I don't really have the answer, because I think attaching an NFT as a certificate to a digital asset is something that is intuitively easier than it would be to attach it to a physical asset, like a painting. So if you say you have a Picasso, how do you attach that NFT to the Picasso? So you have to have a chip which that can't be tempered, or a way to hide within the painting a certain pattern that actually points to NFT. So I don't have the answer technically to this, but I think at this stage, these two worlds are fairly separate, probably, until someone finds a solution. However, I think where they do overlap, and they are likely to overlap faster than we think, is when it comes to tokenization of ownership. And all this is public. I'm not disclosing anything which is confidential with regards to our clients, but the buyer of that work from Beeple is also the founder of an NFT art collection called B20, which is essentially acquiring works. So they haven't put the Beeple work into that collection. They're acquiring works and they're tokenizing these works. So I think we're seeing the art world moving already now with the art NFT space, moving into tokenizing, and individuals saying, well, maybe I don't own the Beeple work that was sold at 69 million, but maybe I can own a token that is one of the 10,000 tokens that are being minted and attached to that work. And I think this is opening an ocean of opportunities for the physical work of art that we see in museums, and probably, and I don't have the answers, probably in the next few years we will see a very different way to trade art and to own art. I don't think Picasso owners today are thinking of tokenizing their painting. I think they're very happy. They have the wealth and the money to actually keep it on their wall, and it's only a portion of their asset base, and not thinking of selling it, and definitely not to cut it into small pieces and give it away. But I think museums, and I think maybe it's a question for you, Heidi, museums spend a lot of money on getting this art on their wall, where their money actually should be spent maybe not on acquiring art, but on maintaining these collections, promoting these collections, talking about these collections, and redeploying in a completely different way the cash that is being trapped. And it's very valid in 2020 with all the COVID thing. This cash is today being trapped on the balance sheet of institutions. So a brilliant way to, everyone could own a piece of a masterpiece that is in a museum. And I think that's why I don't quite see how we're going to attach these NFTs to a physical asset, but I do think that tokenizing the physical assets, we might do it with planes and vessels before we do it with the Picasso, but the principle intellectually of doing it, I think, is extremely interesting.
Interestingly, someone approached me about this maybe 18 months ago, and I thought it was pretty interesting, similar to the way that I'm not such a sports person, but I think it's the Green Bay Packers, where basically the team is owned by the fans. And the idea is, can you have fans of these works of art, like iconic images that are in the collection of museums? And the person that approached me didn't really understand it from the way that you're talking about it. They weren't kind of an art world insider, but I think there is something to that, where you could potentially tokenize iconic works of art, which then museums could use for the care of the collection. So no one's done that yet. And, here we are on a YPO call. So I do think that there's an opportunity there.
And if I can just add to this, is you have all these, and I attend these charity galas, we support them for institutions with auctioneers to raise funds to basically acquire art for the museum. It's a lot of hard work. But if that, let's say, a powerful institution manage to, have $3 million of acquisition fund. I mean, you don't buy that many masterpieces with 3 million. But if you deploy that money, not in buying art, actually it's going to sit in your balance sheets for whatever 100 years, but you deploy it to pay a coupon to owners of pieces that have been tokenized. It's a completely different thing. You basically transform your art collection in a museum into a retail investment product, and the coupon attached to that retail product is actually the fund that have been raised that usually were deployed on a few paintings per year. So the leverage you can have on acquiring is multiples of what the existing model of financing art collection would be. And again, I'm not selling anything here. I'm just throwing thoughts of what I think tokenizing artworks could actually bring to institutions and to retail investors, to public who doesn't want to own a piece of a Picasso. There's very few people who can actually own something. Right today, you have to own the whole thing. You might get a work on paper for 60,000 US, but it's already pretty steep point, pretty steep price point. So I think there's a lot of interesting things down the line.
Well, and it relates back to the question that Herve, I was asking you to talk about earlier, which is, how much time do you look at something and how do you broadcast your ownership? And you talked about Beeple's 2.5 million followers and the idea that people post images from their collection on Instagram, and there's that kind of culture signaling, right? Which we use the digital space for. So there are a few other questions. Yeah, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to build on what Francis is saying. The tokenization is definitely, I mean, at least on my thought process, the tokenization was a big part of, acquiring pieces because, as we know, it's a little bit like an IPO of a privately traded company. When you add liquidity in any market, the value of that market increases. $100 million Picasso, if you add liquidity on it, might be worth $150, $200 million, maybe more. So liquidity and be able to go in and out, not to mention the fact that if you put a Picasso at $20 a share, you'll have a lot more buyer than $100 million for the whole thing. The other part as well, and where I saw a very big opportunity that is going to sound a little bit crazy, is virtual clothing. When you look in the metaverse, one of the fastest categories of growth in NFTs is pieces of clothes. So when you create your avatar in the virtual world, you need basically to have something to wear. And you can create unique Beeple t-shirt based on the piece of art that you own and sell those t-shirts as limited editions. We saw this in New York with Chuck Close, who did a partnership with Gap, and you had people in the street wearing the Gap Chuck Close t-shirt. It happened, with H&M, with, I think it was Basquiat who actually did a partnership with H&M. That would be the same thing in the virtual world. So not only is there the tokenization elements, but you have also different vertical where people can show their unique kind of art sensitivity through the clothing that they wear, and you're opening up to a bigger market also on top of that.
Okay, last question, because we're going to end when we said we would. Do you see, and this is a little bit of a front-loaded question, but do you see artists kind of jumping on the NFT bandwagon, and I'll specifically reference last week's Fair Warning offering, which was a series of like kind of micro artwork NFTs by a super well-known commercially accepted contemporary artist. Who's jumping in here? So, and actually from which side is the market being driven?
I'm Francis, do you want?
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, the art world is something that is very subjective. So like I say, most of the piece that I look for myself, for my own, virtual gallery, is number one, who I spend as much time looking at the pieces than talking to the artist. Is that an artist that is serious about the NFT game? What's their audience? How committed are they, to it? Are they planning to do one of a kinds, or, additions of many? So there's a lot of homework to be done in the selection of the artists. Some of them has, brand equity in the old world. By the way, it's artists. It can be also superstar athletes. It can also be singers who have been jumping on their bandwagon. What they bring to the table, which I think is a little different, is that they bring audiences as well. So, how big is the audience? Somebody that is not an artist, but has a 40 million loyal audience, could that generate, increase of price in the futures? Probably. So I think that's the first part. The second thing also, and I think Christie's did it very well, they partner with artists that are very legitimate. So Beeple has a 13-year track record. So he's not the guy that came out of the where who saw a little bit of buzz in the space. Actually, he's probably the opposite of somebody who's, he's very, geeky from South Carolina, swears every 2 sentences. He's probably the last guy that you would put in front of a movement. But there he is, because he was extremely legitimate as far as an artist is concerned, and he had the track record. The next option is going to be CryptoPunks. So CryptoPunks is also in the forefront of the NFT movement. It has been started at almost as a joke. Some might argue that it's not very artistic pieces, but they're very legitimate within the crypto community itself. So like traditional art is going to be an element of seeing who are the artists who are here to stay, and who are going to be the artists who are there for the fad and for the high tickets.
Fantastic. Francis, last point.
Yeah, when something sells for $69 million, of course you get a whole cohort of people who think, do I get a piece of this for myself? My main point would be art NFT, and that's my personal point of view, is first and foremost a piece of art with all that is attached to it. And of course, it's easier to put an NFT to a digital piece of art, so a design, a piece of music, a video that can be transformed into a digital recording. All this can be transformed into an art NFT, but fundamentally it's the art itself that drives the value of the art NFT, I believe. And I think with all the rules, whether we accept them or we don't, but with all the rules that are attached to the current art market and on how value is being decided, and I made some references to this earlier. It's academic, it's emotional, it's speculation, or it can be the philanthropic value you attach to it, many other things. First and foremost, that's what I believe will drive the economics of the art NFTs in the longer run.
Fantastic. So Herve and Francis, thank you so much for your time today. I don't know if we answered the question, art NFTs, fad or revolution, but I think we definitely made some super interesting conversations around it, shared some tactical information, and I think we should probably recircle back here in a little bit of time. It's hard to say with this quickly moving market, whether that means we should get back together in 5 days or 5 months. But I think we'll definitely come back to this topic. And thank you everyone for being here today, and to the Art Network Committee for putting this together. I really appreciate everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Brilliant. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Armando, great event. Thank you.
Hey, Robbie, thank you. And
I learned quite a lot, actually. I never understood what this business was all about.
it's
I'm still-
interesting.
I'm still not convinced that I'm buying. I have already enough problems with photography when the guy holds his negative and he can print as many times as he wants.
Interesting. It's very
Yeah,
interesting.
crazy world. Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you for organizing.
Okay. Thank you.
See you
Ciao.
soon. Bye. Bye.
Do you have a special WhatsApp group to continue this conversation? Because I would love to join, I'm really into this digital art and all these things.
Yes, I was going to post this here. If you can send me your number, I can include you. Let me put in the post my cell phone, so you can maybe WhatsApp me, and then
Okay, I will.
And then with that, Armando Beltran, and I can include you there. So there it is.
Thank you.
There it is for everyone. I'm not an expert in Zoom, man. I try to do my best in this one, so good.
No, it was really good. Thank you, Armando, for putting that together.
Wonderful. Lana, thank you very much. And thank you also. Daphna was there.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. We'll be in touch. I'm going to be asking to meet again probably next week for another executive committee session to make sure we keep this going. No? So good conversation. Okay. So I'm going to be disconnecting now then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Tatiana, send
Bye-bye.
us a message, please.
Yeah, I will. I'll do it right now. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.